Alright, at number 10 we have the very silly but nonetheless evil Super Enemies. In the 1970s animated TV show Super Friends, there's an episode in 1979 called Universe of Evil, where Superman travels to an alternate universe to meet the evil counterparts to the Super Friends, very creatively named the Super Enemies. And the team is made up of all those bad guys we've all known so well and grown up with. You know, like Aquaman with an eye patch, and tinted red Batman, and oh, who could forget the iconic alien monkey Gleek? What a trailblazing team of supervillains they were. But as much as I roast them, they do actually pose a decent threat to Superman in this storyline, to the point where they team up with the military armed with kryptonite weapons, and even bring in their own version of Superman, giving our Superman a good old run for his money. But luckily, Superman Prime finds something called an antimatter flask, which turns all the super enemies back to being good again. Thank God Aquaman retires that eye patch and is no longer so intensely menacing looking. What a relief.
Number 9. Justice League of Assassins. Unfortunately, this evil Justice League didn't stick around too long. Being first introduced in Superman Volume 4, number 15 in March 2017, the Justice League of Assassins on Earth 14 were a group of augmented, mostly non-superpowered soldiers led by the obviously powerful Superman. The team was made up of Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Flash, Batman, Harley Quinn, and Green Lantern. With the exception of Superman, their powers relied mainly on weapons and technology, but primarily they used advanced firearms. Ultimately, they were all slaughtered, with this Superman being kidnapped by Prophecy, which is a shame, because this team looked super cool and they seemed to inhabit a pretty dark and grim looking post-apocalypse. Could have been very interesting.
At number 8 we have the Conglomerate. This group is basically a bizarro version of the Justice League created by Booster Gold. The group is formed after Booster's departure from the Justice League International due to a lack of respect from his peers. When Booster first fails to bring together a competent group of heroes to form the first iteration of the Conglomerate, someone named Claire Montgomery comes in to manage the group. With her, she brings along the likes of Deadeye, an alternate Green Arrow, Fiero, a guy with fire powers, Frostbite, an ice power guy, Elastaman, a stretchy man, Element Man, much like Metamorpho, Scarab, a knockoff of Blue Beetle, and Slipstream, a dollar store Flash. When they engage in a small friendly skirmish with the Justice League International, the fight quickly turns serious, and everyone learns at once that these new members have actually been brought from an antimatter world called Quard, and they're basically just entirely evil. And always had been. Luckily the JLI take them down, but it's a close one.
Number 7. Squadron Sinister. This isn't so much an evil alternate Justice League as this team actually appears in the Marvel universe. But I'm gonna count it because I'm just stubborn like that. The original Squadron Sinister was created as a sort of obvious play on DC Comics Justice League characters Superman, Batman, Green Lantern, and the Flash, with the characters Hyperion, Nighthawk, Dr. Spectrum, and the hilariously named Wizard, respectively. The team was created by the Grand Master after he encountered the Squadron Supreme, and they first appeared in Avengers number 69 when they were pitted against the Avengers in a game between the Grand Master and Kang the Conqueror. They're bad guys who are counterparts to 4 members of the Justice League. I gotta stop justifying my reasons. They're on the list. Argue with me down below if you don't like it.
Alright, at number 6 we have the Justice Lords. Appearing in the animated series Justice League in the episode titled A Better World, this evil team is led by a radicalized Superman. Radicalized because he witnesses Lex Luthor murder the Flash and threaten nuclear war. So, Superman decides he'd abandon the typical hero's code of conduct and kill the bald tyrant himself. And in this alternate universe, Lex Luthor isn't just some super rich supervillain working away and hiding, he's actually worked his way to becoming the President of the United States. So, after his death, there is a power vacuum to be filled. And who would be better rulers than this evil alternate Justice League? No one. They didn't think so anyway, so they take over and put in place a totalitarian government with the justification being that they are protecting humanity from itself. And they start calling themselves the Justice Lords, which, I mean, you should sort of know you're the bad guys when the word Lord is in your title. Luckily, the real Superman is able to catch on and take them out of power before anything goes too far.
Number 5. Injustice League. Okay, so we have the Crime Syndicate of America, but there was also a team of villains put together to fight that team of villains. So, sort of technically making these villains heroes, but also not really because they're still villains. Right? The important information here is that the Injustice League, at least the one I'm referring to, was formed to combat the Crime Syndicate of America from Earth 3. The team's villainous members included Bizarro, Black Manta, Black Adam, Catwoman, Deathstroke, Sinestro or Parallax, Captain Cold, and they were formed and led by Lex Luthor. The team first appeared in Forever Evil #3 in January of 2014 when the Crime Syndicate of America invaded the Prime Earth universe and tried, and very nearly did, take over the world.
At number 4, we have the Injustice Syndicate. I know, lots of groups with Syndicate and Injustice in their names. Well, that's because this evil version of the Justice League actually exists as a sort of combination between the Injustice League and the Crime Syndicate, both of which are included in this list respectively. Appearing in Batman the Brave and the Bold, in the episode called Deep Cover for Batman, Batman manages to travel to their evil dimension and infiltrate their operations disguised as Owlman. He sees that this group comprises of an evil version of himself, along with other evil alternate versions of other heroes he knows and works with. While eavesdropping, Batman learns of their plans to, destroy other universes entirely, which of course, he feels is something he needs to put a stop to. And it can't wait, naturally. So he decides to take all of them on himself, and because he's Batman, and it is his TV show after all, he wins. Those universes can thank him later.
Number 3, the Joker League. In Emperor Joker #1 of October 2000, the Joker has gained 99.99% of the reality warping powers of the 5th dimensional being, Mr. Mxyzptlk, and he used them to completely warp the world into an insane offshoot of our real world. In this Joker world, he has put together an evil, insane version of the Justice League called the Joker League of Anarchy. The team members include some characters we've seen before, such as Bizarro #1, Enigma, who's the Riddler, Gravedigger Lad, who is actually Jimmy Olsen, Lois Lane, Harley Quinn, and Poison Ivy. He has also created completely new characters that are wholly original to this story: Ignition, Bounty, Schism, and Scorched. He even has Lex Luthor as a jester. They are basically just the henchmen of this already pretty much all-powerful version of the Joker. Just another way of keeping him entertained, it seems.
At number 2, I'm putting the Injustice League from the video game Injustice: Gods Among Us. Most of us already know how this story goes, but in case you don't, this is one of the cooler and more well-written storylines about an evil alternate version of the Justice League. In most cases on this list, these evil groups are created by an alternate reality, which is always fun but pretty simple to come up with. But this storyline shows a radicalized Superman leading the Justice League to the dark side. And like I said, this isn't because he's an evil version of Superman or one that's possessed by some evil force. He's genuinely turned to evil after the Joker tricks him into killing Lois Lane. So to combat this new unexpected evil force, Batman decides to bring in other members from the Justice League from another universe, and the result is some pretty great fighting gameplay. And right as the game was being released, a comic book series of the same name was also being released in tandem, serving as a prequel to the game, where you can derive general story points from the game itself. Most of the backstory I just explained actually comes from the comics. It's cool to see the video game and comic book worlds working in tandem, and they make a pretty cool new storyline that I figure has to be ranked pretty high on this list.
Number 1, the Crime Syndicate of America. The Crime Syndicate of America hails from the strength-obsessed Earth 3, and is a twisted, evil version of many characters who make up the main universe Justice League of America. Its members include Ultraman in place of Superman, Thomas Wayne Jr., aka Owlman, and Alfred Pennyworth as the Outsider, Superwoman, who was Lois Lane at one point and Donna Troy at another, the cowardly Harold Jordan and vengeful John Stewart, who are both Power Ring, which are evil Green Lanterns, at different times, John Allen and John Chambers separately also as Johnny Quick, Atomica, Sea King, Deathstorm, Grid, and John Johns. They come into contact with the main universe many times, and they almost always spell out bad news, as you'd expect from the antithesis to the Justice League of America.
An intent exposed Batman. While this seems like something any version of Superman would do if they turned bad, it's actually interesting to see that only the Injustice version of Superman actually did it. Yes, after getting fed up of Batman leading the resistance against his totalitarian regime, because, that's a bad thing, Bruce, Superman tells the whole world that Batman is really Bruce Wayne. How does he do this, you may ask? like a press conference or like a world message or like a video? No, none of the above. The dude just freaking tweets. Superman, in just 4 simple words, tells the world that Batman is Bruce Wayne. Using those 4 words, actually, in that order. From the official Superman Twitter account, by the way. Dude doesn't even use his Clark Kent Twitter. Like, he's still hiding behind his identity, but he decides to out Bruce's. That's hypocrisy right there. But I guess that's all politicians. With over 2.5 million retweets and over 3.5 million favorites, this is certainly #1 on trending for sure. At least until Kim K posts a pic in like a sexy Batman costume, so that the whole Bruce is actually Batman thing moves to #2, and then the whole internet breaks again. And at 9, joining Reverse Flash. In Tales from the Dark Multiverse 1, Flashpoint, we see a world where Barry Allen died while attempting to get his speed back with Thomas Wayne in the Flashpoint timeline. This leads to Reverse Flash claiming to be the Flash and trying to end the war with the Atlanteans and Amazons by threatening them. Obviously, this doesn't work out because they're the goddamn Atlanteans and Amazons. So, in an effort to save himself, Reverse Flash races through time, changing events to create the world exactly how he wants it, which involves saving not only Bruce Wayne, but Martha and Thomas Wayne as well, resulting in a world without a Batman. Because, you know, Batman's gonna fight against Reverse Flash no matter what. So just getting rid of Batman, this is the smartest thing any villain has ever done, straight up. But on the final page of this issue, we see Eobard with all the new heroes he ended up creating and convincing them to join him, as we can see by the Reverse Flash symbols on their suits. Even Green Lanterns and Wonder Woman has one. This page also has a Superman and honestly, 6 suit, but being controlled, or I guess led by the Reverse Flash, makes this utterly horrifying to think about, especially when you can see the other members of the Flash family racing behind Reverse Flash. Like, he finally got what he wanted. Eobard became the Flash, and now he has his own Justice League that serves his own purposes. This should have been higher. And at 8, put Atlantis in the desert. Superman has his dark moments in Injustice. This especially includes Injustice Gods Among Us #12, written by Tom Taylor with art from Mike Miller and Tom Denerick. Injustice Gods Among Us 12 shows readers Aquaman unleashing Atlantean armies on coastal cities around the globe as a way to show Superman that, you know, it's not gonna happen. Atlantis will not be taken. Superman, of course, takes this as a threat, because of course he does, and you know, Batman knew this would happen. But Aquaman, being Aquaman, refuses to back down, and Superman decides to teach him a lesson. But rather than actually like attacking and probably killing Aquaman, Superman enlists the help of Wonder Woman and the Green Lantern to literally lift Atlantis from the ocean and set it down in the middle of the Sahara Desert, as far from water as he could possibly get on Earth. Honestly, he might as well just put them in space, although that would just be like direct murder and everyone would have gotten mad at that. But like, honestly, I don't think Superman is above that. This guy is a frickin' monster. And it's 7, killing Green Arrow. Being as powerful as he is, it's important that Superman keeps a tight grip on his sanity and his powers, because, you know, a huge part of the reason that Clark trusts Bruce with shards of kryptonite is because he knows that he can end up being used as a weapon or just going crazy if Lois dies. In this case, he wants Batman to stop him using that kryptonite. However, when Superman goes too far, sometimes nobody's actually there to stop him. In Injustice Gods Among Us #11, the issue before Superman dropped Atlantis in the Sahara Desert, when the Green Arrow is trying to distract Superman, he fires an arrow at him that bounces off Superman because, you know, it's not a kryptonite arrow, but then it hits his father, Jonathan Kent, in the shoulder. It doesn't kill him. He's fine, he just got shot in the shoulder, but Superman gets so enraged at this that he flies at Green Arrow and immediately starts beating him to death in a furious rage. I mean, like, killing him would be one thing because he's Oliver Queen and he's like one of the sexiest men alive, but brutally beating him is something else entirely, especially with his mother yelling at him, begging for him to stop. Like, dude, listen to your mom, she knows best. Eat your vegetables. And at 6, Batman's backup plan. At this point, it's pretty well known that Bruce Wayne kept files and tools to destroy each of the members of the Justice League if it was necessary. Though Clark, like I said, wants Batman to have this ability since he fears himself if he ends up getting manipulated or whatnot, like literally every time Brainiac shows up. But the other Justice League members have not given Batman their information or like been like, yeah man, you can do that. In JLA, The Tower of Babel by Mark Waid and Howard Porter, Batman is shown to keep secret records of how to completely destroy each and every member of the Justice League. These records are then taken by Ra's al Ghul and used to decimate the League, proving an ultimate betrayal on the part of Bruce Wayne. Okay, I get it, like I understand the desire to be prepared since, you know, people in this universe seem to be turned by villains like Brainiac on a regular basis, but that's what Task Force X is for. That's why we have a whole game called Kill the Justice League. You don't need to have like a super secret, this is how you kill all of us hard drive that just begs for every single villain to try and steal it. Like, it's kind of stupid how you thought that was a good idea. All you need to do is have it in your brain. You're the world's greatest detective and you couldn't detect that that was a bad idea. Halfway through into number 5, Wonder Woman destroying the Justice League. When it comes to power and skill levels, Wonder Woman is arguably one of the strongest members of the Justice League. Characters like Superman and Martian Manhunter may have incredible power as aliens, and Superman especially may well just be the most powerful hero of all, but Wonder Woman is also basically a deity, at least being a god adjacent, because, you know, she's an Amazon. She's one of DC's most powerful heroes, if not their most powerful hero, especially if Kryptonite's around, and she has to keep her abilities and powers in check, much like how Spider-Man always has to pull his punches so he doesn't kill someone. However, in a one-shot called JLA A League of One, written by Christopher Moeller, Wonder Woman realizes that the Justice League are just holding her back. She realizes that the entire league will be destroyed if she doesn't stop them herself, so she takes on each member of the Justice League and takes them down on her own so that she can act individually, kinda like a mini version of Marvel's Civil War but on a much smaller and less daunting scale. Though understandable, this is still an initial betrayal and a major hurt. Luckily for Wonder Woman, her team does forgive her, because, you know, she didn't actually kill them. Maybe she was just having a midlife crisis, we don't know. In at 4, Aquaman and Wonder Woman War. Ha, it rhymes. Ah, look at that, I managed to squeeze 2 Flashpoint numbers onto this list, hell yeah. I mean, they're different Flashpoints, but still. In the animated The Flashpoint Paradox movie in the DC animated universe, the world is much different to its CW counterpart, and, like, kind of the general DC universe, mostly due to the war between Aquaman and Wonder Woman, who end up being the villains of the movie, thanks to them being former lovers while Aquaman was married to Mera, and then Wonder Woman then killed Mera when she tried to get revenge for her sleeping with her husband. But to be fair, she also wears Mera's crown after she kills her, so it's not really like it was like, oh yeah, it was self-defense. However, this war actually resulted in the destruction of the planet at the exact moment that Barry was able to get enough speed back to get back into the Speed Force and set everything straight. It's a really suspenseful moment where Reverse Flash had just been killed by Batman, so Barry would have enough speed to run back and stop himself from saving his mother. He managed to get into the Speed Force just before the world's destruction caught up with him. It's absolutely insane. It's very Justice League Zack Snyder cut-esque. However, I'm pretty sure they got it from this movie either way. He managed to get back into the Speed Force before the world's destruction, and then the world was destroyed. But, so yeah, it's a bad thing, okay? Even if the Justice League isn't really a thing in this universe, it was still their fault. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Injustice. I think the whole Injustice Earth is enough of a sin to earn a spot on this list. Just the entirety of the Injustice world is truly an injustice. In a parallel universe, the Joker tricks Superman into killing his pregnant wife Lois Lane and detonating a nuclear weapon that destroys Metropolis, killing millions of people. Mad with grief and rage, and because, you know, Lois Lane died in this universe, Superman goes dark and murders the Joker, quickly losing his moral compass. 5 years after this moment, Superman has formed the One Earth regime to enforce global peace through fear, and rules the Earth as a ruthless dictator with an iron fist. Or I guess a steel fist. Get it? Because he's the Man of Steel. Anyway, alongside many other heroes and villains, he recruited or forced into joining him and killing any who oppose him. Batman ends up establishing the Insurgency, which is actually supposed to oppose Superman's regime, and then that's why he exposes his identity. But then the ensuing war between the factions just leaves the Justice League disbanded. But either way, this is probably one of the darkest timelines. Penultimately, in at number 2, ruled the world. Usually when people talk about Superman ruling the world, they're talking about injustice. And while that is a great story and an example of what can go wrong with superheroes, the story of the King of the World world is actually a good cautionary tale about Superman other than injustice. In the late 90s, this story features a series of prophecy-like dreams that make Superman realize that his regular MO of just flying around and waiting for disasters to happen isn't really working. And Kal-El decides to be a little more, proactive. In this case, that means building a series of spy satellites to survey Earth, helping Superman keep track of everything that's happening all at once, and then giving up his life as Clark Kent to work as Superman full time. Sleep deprived and losing his grip on humanity, Superman starts interfering more and more in Earth's affairs, toppling extremist governments and even changing the weather. When he realizes that he still can't be everywhere at once though, the Man of Steel deploys an army of Superman robots to help maintain law and order. Again, making him a benevolent dictator. Only snapping out of it when he gets a kiss from Lois Lane. None of the Justice League really tries to stop him either. They just kind of accept it, which is surprising, especially for Batman. Although I find it funny how the Man of Steel deployed Men of Steel. And finally, and at number 1, getting Alfred killed. Look, after Bruce Wayne loses his parents, Thomas and Martha, he's a young boy, okay? The only person who can truly take care of Bruce is Alfred Pennyworth, the Wayne family butler. However, Alfred ends up becoming like a second father to Bruce, raising him to adulthood and caring for him throughout his entire life. He also cares for Bruce's children, as a grandfather, and sometimes even more of a father than Bruce to them. Alfred is incredibly important to Bruce, and probably the only family that the man truly has left. But in Injustice Year 5, number 23, Alfred is spending his birthday alone at Wayne Manor. Unbeknownst to him, Superman has sent the supervillain Victor Zsasz to interrogate him, an altercation which will ultimately result in Alfred's death. I know it was the Injustice Earth, okay, and Supes is a horrible person there, but honestly, think about it. This is the worst thing that Superman, and by proxy his Injustice League, has ever done. Because Alfred is the purest character in all of DC Comics. And in the moment that Alfred died, so did a piece of the DC universe. It doesn't matter if it was in one of infinite Earths and it was one of infinite Alfreds, none of them deserved this.
Coming in at number 10 today is Milkman Man. The DC Universe Wiki says that Milkman Man is an imperfect copy of Superman, but with all that calcium, I gotta assume he has the strongest bones that you and I have ever seen. In JLA/Doom Patrol Special, The Milk Wars, the Doom Patrol has discovered that an interdimensional corporation called Retco has been stealing stories, reconfiguring them, and repackaging them for new markets. Retco has embedded itself into the current continuity, using the radioactive milk of psychic cows to quell the more dangerous impulses of the Justice League and turn them into heroes that are safe for the masses. That is literally the quote from the official summary, I am not even joking. Milkman Man specifically has all the same powers as the famous Kryptonian superhero, only he's a milkman and central part of the Community League of Rhode Island. Now, this group is actually a very sinister collection of pleasant-spoken normal folks. I know this doesn't sound scary, necessarily, but it's just like unsettling, like Twilight Zone style. Please do yourself the favor of reading this story and trying to figure out what the heck is going on, because it took me like a hot minute. Number 9, Red Sun Superman. Instead of landing in America, Red Sun Superman landed in the Soviet Union, and that allowed the Soviets to weaponize him instead of allowing him to live the quote normal life he traditionally has in the US. He received severe training that not even the original Superman underwent, as Red Sun Superman was always meant to be a weapon. This allowed him to become quite strong as he paired his severe training with his new communist sense of duty. If the training he underwent wasn't enough to prove this power though, Superman advanced the Soviet Union to almost worldwide control without resorting to war, and he virtually eliminated poverty and disease. While this sounds pretty great, it was supported by some pretty awful tactics behind closed doors by Superman himself, but also those who worked under him. This powerful version of Superman is a much more skilled Superman, if not slightly more ruthless, as that's what he was raised to be. But it was his ability to eventually realize the fault in his own actions and allow the world to become a utopia that kind of puts him a cut above everyone else, which is why he is at number 9 today. But he did turn people into mindless cyborg zombies, so he's a little terrifying. Number 8. Earth 17 Superman. On Earth 17, superheroes are a product of government experiments. The Superman of this universe, who was called Overman, was the first hero, with the other heroes being spawns of his DNA. Now this may be weird, but that ain't the weird part. He also doesn't seem horrifying at all yet, does he? Well, after contracting a certain kind of physically transmitted disease from another person, like that kind of disease, if you know what I'm saying, he ends up going insane and destroys the Justice League and reduces his entire world to rubble. He then gets his filthy paws on a doomsday device that he intends to use on Earth 17 to completely wipe it out. The Crisis on Infinite Earths destroyed this reality, just like DC tried to destroy such a naughty Superman story, even having different iterations of Overman, who we will be talking about in just a moment. But the internet never forgets DC Comics, and people like me exist to remind everyone of the things you published into this world, like naughty Superman contracting naughty diseases and reducing the world to ash. Ick. Number 7. Eradicator Lois. For this point, we are going back in time to the infamous death of Superman's story. When Superman fell in the fight between himself and Doomsday, it didn't hit anyone as hard as it hit Lois Lane. Well, in the dark multiverse, something curious happened. After some time passed and Lois saw the effects of a Superman-less world, she eventually traveled to the Fortress of Solitude to return Superman's cape. What she never expected was for the Kryptonian Eradicator to show up. This defender of Krypton is the reason that Superman does eventually come back to life in the real world, placing Clark in the Kryptonian life matrix that was supposed to revive Superman. In this story though, it takes longer than expected, and so, assuming that the revival was a failure, the Eradicator instead places the powers of Superman into the body of Lois Lane. Unfortunately, this is the dark multiverse though, and so this newly superpowered Lois Lane throws almost all caution to the wayside and uses her powers recklessly. Saving the day, sure, but with no regard for collateral damage or repercussions. She ends wars, feeds the hungry, destroys the military-industrial complex, all that good stuff, but she also wipes out countless lives, including Batman's, Lex Luthor's, and she's even responsible for the fall of Superman when he does finally return. The whole story is super tragic, but that also makes it one of the best to come out of the dark multiverse, in my opinion. Number 6. Overman. I told you we would talk about another Overman. This version of our favorite red and blue boy didn't end up in Kansas when he was ejected from Krypton. No, this Kal-El found himself in Sudetenland, Germany in 1938, and he was acquired by a certain mustached fascist. With Kal and Kryptonian tech, the Reich were obviously able to win World War II and rule over the entire planet. Later, Overman would become disgusted with the stashed man when his annihilation of those he deemed lesser had been finalized. Although Superman still served that man's political party, weird set of morals there, I don't know. Eventually though, he was cloned and received a romantic partner in the form of Overgirl. But after her passing, he was completely heartbroken and he supplied information to the freedom fighters who long opposed the fascists, which eventually led to the end of the new Reichman, this world's evil Justice League, and the city of Metropolis. With the grief of all those losses holding him down, he was overthrown by his own best friend. But I wouldn't feel too bad for him though, he was pretty bad. Number 5. Ultraman. Who would have thought that a Superman who is just a giant man baby would be one of the more powerful versions of the character? Ultraman is the Superman of Earth 3, where strength and power are held above everything else, even good and righteousness. Ultraman was born on the dying Krypton to Jor-Il, who was able to secure a life pod for his incredibly powerful son, who he saw as his best chance of revenge. While in his life pod, Kal-El was given the ideology of becoming the strongest possible being, eschewing all weakness in himself and in others. His rocket crash landed in Smallville, right through the home of the dysfunctional couple, Johnny and Martha Kent, who he forced to be his parents until he was 7 years old, when he then took their lives and burned their home to the ground. He took the name Ultraman, took over the Earth, and created the crime syndicate of America. Unlike Superman, Ultraman actually gets more powerful from kryptonite, and the sun is what makes him weaker, which is fine because he will literally just move the moon to block out the sun. Number 4, Brutal. Brutal is a cloned version of Superman, but unlike a certain bizarre version of Superman, this duplication was done by none other than Darkseid himself. Darkseid raised the resulting clone into a weapon and unleashed him on the superheroes of Earth 2, along with Steppenwolf and the other Hunger Dogs. Now when Steppenwolf tried to subvert his master Darkseid and take Earth as his own, Brutal ruthlessly, or some might say brutally, takes Steppenwolf from this plane of existence with his heat vision, establishing his devotion to his Lord Darkseid, being all like, "Let me make my intentions clear, hail Darkseid," which is just a sweet line after you take down a general of Darkseid. Now the Earth became lost to Darkseid's minions, and eventually, after a lot of other stuff, Kal-Zod, Earth 2's really awesome Superman, faced Brutal in combat, and after a furious battle, showed that Brutal was just an imitation, and a cheap one at that, as his body began to deteriorate, all Spider-Man clone degradation style, and the day was finally saved. Number 3, Injustice Superman. The Superman of the Injustice universe has pretty much the same history as the baseline Superman, but when the Joker kidnaps the pregnant Lois Lane, it lures Superman into a trap of fear gas. In this fear-induced state, Superman hallucinates his wife as the villain Doomsday and instantly attacks, flying Lois and what would have been John Kent into space, taking their lives and also inadvertently causing a nuclear detonation to destroy his city, Metropolis. After suddenly losing his city, wife, and his baby, Superman goes into a pretty honestly understandable rage, bursting into the interrogation room where Batman is learning the true intentions of the Joker, and he plunges his super fist straight through the clown's chest. Following these events, Superman takes control of the Earth and rules it as a tyrant. He turns on and destroys his friends, is manipulated by Wonder Woman, holds nothing back, and puts the entire Earth under the control of his regime. He is a seriously hardcore version of Superman who has actually been revisited recently in John Kent's comic book story, where he even took the life of Earth 3's Ultraman pretty easily. It was kinda nuts. Number 2, Super Doom. On Earth 45, Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, and Clark Kent are scientists instead of reporters, and they use their smarts to build a machine that can turn thoughts into reality, which, I gotta be honest, how the heck did they think that was a good idea? I can think of 10 things right now off the top of my head that should never become reality. Anyways, using the aforementioned thought to form machine, they tried to create a being called Superman, who would be capable of doing amazing things and who could save worlds. But when they are forced to give their idea over to Overcorp, these guys decide to rebrand and end up creating a monstrosity, Superman, the Last Knight of Tomorrow, or as he's better known to everyone else, Super Doom. With a corporate-fueled agenda of destroying all competition, Super Doom quickly becomes the strongest super being on its own planet, and then entered into the bleed space to take out all the other versions of Superman across the multiverse. Of course, bad guys never win forever, so after defeating and devouring multiple different Supermen of multiple different Earths, he was stopped by the Superman and Lex Luthor of Earth 22, who stranded him between universes. He's since been used in a few other storylines and remains one of the most formidable evil versions of Superman to this day because he didn't actually pass away. He's still out there, just like between universes. Crazy. And finally, in at number 1 today, it's Bump in the Night. For starters, DC's House of Horror is basically a collection of short stories featuring different characters. They are all equally interesting and horror themed. The Possession of Billy Batson and the Last Laugh stories are particularly interesting, but for today's video, I think we want to talk about the very first one, Bump in the Night. This short story follows Martha Kent on the night Kal-El arrives on Earth. Jonathan Kent has gone out to explore what exactly caused a big bang and trail of smoke on the Kent's farm, but he doesn't come back. As Martha worries about where her husband has gone to, she goes back inside, but Martha starts hearing bumping and thumping coming from upstairs in the house. All of a sudden, a demonic humanoid child crashes through the ceiling and begins attacking her. She tries to run to the barn, but fiery beams of energy fire from the creature, blowing up the barn. She takes refuge in her truck only for the creature to land on the hood, shrieking. It throws the truck across the yard and Martha gets out wounded only for the truck to explode. The tiny little creature then flies away with the symbol of an S emblazoned on its own chest.
Number 10, Reverend Bruce Bruce Wayne. Reverend Bruce isn't particularly scary to begin with, but the world he comes from and the fight he fights is definitely scary. This is a version of Batman who isn't just taking up the mantle to fight his parents' killers and rid Gotham of crime, but instead is attempting to fight against a whole political and societal system. In the Elseworlds story Batman Holy Terror, the course of history is changed somewhat so that America is basically still part of the Commonwealth. As such, it turns out that the seemingly random mugging and murder of Bruce's parents was not actually so random, and was actually a government hit that was later made to look like a mugging gone wrong. When Reverend Bruce finds out about this, he dons a demon costume that once belonged to his father Thomas and sets out to investigate. He also goes on to find out about government-run human experiments and an alien whom they captured, raised, and later killed with green rocks when he became too hard to control. Poor would-be Superman. Number 9. Gods and Monsters Batman. This version of Batman is not Bruce Wayne, but is instead Kirk Langstrom. In this reality, there is no Bruce Wayne to take up the mantle, and so Kirk ends up with the name himself. Not because he was inspired by a bat smashing through a window, of course, but because he is kind of actually part vampire bat. Kirk was a brilliant scientist who was working on a cure for lymphoma. He eventually figured out how to create this cure using bat saliva and nanotech to strengthen his experimental treatment. However, while it succeeded in curing his cancer, it also turned Kirk into a pseudo-vampire. While he remains a hero and typically only ingests artificially created plasma or even animals' blood, which can also help him to survive, he has also been known to feed on criminals from time to time. He's like, these criminals, nah, I gotta eat, they kinda deserve it, I'm just gonna eat them. And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more scary alternate Batman lists, of which, let's be real, there's a lot of scary alternate Batman out there, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Spooky thumbs up. Spooky spook. Number 8. DCEU Batman, or Batfleck if you prefer. Ben Affleck's Batman from Batman vs Superman especially is a much darker figure in comparison to the comics, and kind of in comparison to a lot of other Batmen that have been on the big screen. This is a version of the hero who has decided that he is willing to kill when he needs to. All in all, it seems to be implied that the death of Jason Todd is what reshaped Batman's morals here and caused him to readjust his code. Not only does he kill, but he also does something even worse in my opinion, branding some of the worst criminals that he fights against with a literal bat brand. These are the criminals that Batman has deemed to have done something completely unforgivable. And the thing is that people in prison in Gotham also know the significance of the bat brand, meaning that those who end up with one are basically marked for death. The idea here is that the inmates will carry out the death sentence that Batman has marked them with because they know that whatever this person did, it was one of the worst crimes, otherwise they wouldn't have this brand. So not only is there an extra layer of fear, but this also shows a complete disregard for human life. I mean, at least a disregard for human life when it comes to really terrible criminals. Batman wants these criminals to live in fear, and he doesn't care what happens to them in prison. In fact, he kinda hopes that they end up dead. Number 7. Batman the Silenced. One perfect spine-chilling dark multiverse tale that I have loved, which even comes with its own creepy lullaby, is the Tales from the Dark Multiverse Batman Hush. In this story we get a reimagined narrative where Batman's childhood friend, Thomas Elliot, is the one who ends up messing up Bruce's life. Tommy in his adult years allies himself with many of Gotham's villains, and more usually anti-hero types, after Bruce Wayne ends up in Arkham Asylum, which also was kind of part of his doing. However, Bruce isn't quite as checked out as he's been pretending to be, and he ends up escaping in order to get revenge and taking up the mantle of Batman the Silenced, an alternate version basically of Hush, and of course an alternate version of Batman. Number 6. Vampire Batman. This alternate version of Batman comes to us from the alternate Earth 43. As his moniker describes, he is a version of Bruce Wayne who transforms into a more literal version of Batman when he becomes a vampire. Batman. Get it? Cause vampire bats. Oddly enough, this is also not the only version of Batman in the multiverse that also happens to be a vampire, as you already know, because we talked about Gods and Monsters Batman as well, who's also a vampire. Despite being a vampire on Earth 43, Bruce still fights on the good side, fighting against his vampiric urges to feed on human blood. At least Initially, he fights against them. At one point, Vampire Bats asks Alfred to stake him in order to prevent him from giving in to his bloodlust, after he seemingly killed the Joker by draining him of all of his blood. However, a stake through the heart doesn't actually kill Batman here, but simply leaves him in a coma. Months later, Gotham is in a pretty bad place without Batman's presence, and Alfred is forced to awaken him in hopes that Gotham will once more have a savior. Batman does go about taking out criminals, but in a very vampiric way, creating a bloodbath as his time staked and his bodily decay has resulted in the loss of his sanity. So he's there and he's killing criminals, but he's like killing criminals, and it's like a lot. Number 5. The Merciless. This alternate version of Bruce is one who ends up wielding the power of Ares in the memory of Wonder Woman. Oh yeah, and he's also the one who fought with Diana to the very end against Ares before he inevitably was kind of forced to kill her. Or forced in his eyes, but in our eyes we're like, Bruce, don't do that. Don't do it. This alternate version of Bruce Wayne, aka Batman, hails from the dark multiverse of Earth at -42 and is one of the Batman Who Laughs Dark Knights. To me, he represents Bruce's obsession with power and symbolizes what could very well happen if this was left unchecked. Bruce here loved Diana, but still ended up betraying her because he knew that she would not allow him to keep the power of Ares for himself, and that she would rather destroy such power. So he was like, I gotta hold on to the power because I'm doing great with it, so I guess I gotta kill ya. But also, he wasn't doing that great with it. Spoiler alert. Number 4. The Bruce. This alternate version of Batman comes to us from the reality belonging to Batman I Joker. Here Batman is a tyrant and a symbol who is worshipped as a god. This is not our own Bruce Wayne, by the way, but like a dystopian, almost cyberpunk future version of the character where the people of Gotham see him as their ruler and god. In fact, I don't even know if this guy's name is actually Bruce Wayne or is Bruce at all. I think he's just a person that's elected and like that's the role you play, or that seized power. The people of Gotham worship him and his mission for vengeance. The whole comic is pretty horrifying to read and reveals how even the best of heroic intentions can be perverted over time. Nothing scarier than just humanity and the way that we think things through and can like take a good idea and make it into something a lot more sinister. That's the scariest thing of them all. Well, almost. There's a few more points. Number 3. Murder Machine. Murder Machine is an alternate version of Bruce Wayne who hails from the dark multiverse reality of Earth -44. Here Bruce Wayne turns to his friend and colleague Cyborg for help, building an AI to supplement Alfred after Bruce's longtime friend, butler, and father figure is tragically murdered. However, this AI is programmed to protect Bruce at all costs, which ends up leading the Alfred Protocol, as it's named here, to take over Bruce, replacing his human body with a mechanical, indestructible, and immortal one, turning Bruce into the Murder Machine. The Alfred Protocol, which Bruce is now fully merged with, also takes away Bruce's ability to feel fear or sadness. I think you know where this is going. It's not going to a good place. In the end, it labels everyone a threat to Bruce and helps him to kill all those who could potentially harm him, including the entire Justice League. Pretty bleak stuff. Number 2. Nemesis. Nemesis is probably one of the most brutal Batman alternates we've ever encountered. Probably also because he doesn't even hail from DC Comics himself, but instead is a creation of Mark Millar's, who hails from Icon Comics. Mark Millar doesn't hail from Icon Comics, but this character does. Mark Millar does many things. Well, we do have an elaborate backstory for Nemesis, which involves him also seeking vengeance for the death of his parents, but in a much more twisted way. Since his parents were actually the worst kind of wealthy folks and murderers themselves, it's never really even confirmed that this backstory is the true backstory of Nemesis. In fact, it's even implied in the story that Nemesis could actually be multiple people who just cause mayhem and death and destruction because, well, maybe they just enjoy it? The whole idea of the character and everything that he does is pretty messed up and is quite dark. Nemesis provides a much more villainous take on the idea of vigilantes and how motivation can mess you up, or alternatively, how you really don't even need motivation to become a messed up and brutal vigilante in the first place. Also power. Lots of things about power, because that's how it goes. Number 1. Batman Who Laughs. Obviously, one of the darkest and scariest alternate versions of Batman out there has to be the Batman Who Laughs. This version of Batman is actually like an amalgamation of Joker and Batman, but he is ultimately an alternate of Bruce Wayne, because he is Bruce Wayne, so a little more Bruce really than Joker in the end. He used to fight crime as Batman, but one day Joker took things too far and caused Batman to snap. And not just snap internally, but externally as well, when he actually snapped Joker's neck, killing him. Joker released a special brand of Joker venom with his last breath, which Bruce breathed in. Over time, this venom made him paranoid and homicidal, and ultimately, he became the villain of the story, going so far as to kill all the members of the Bat family. Knowing they would not be able to join him, or not be willing to join him, I guess I should say, well, he killed all of them at least except one. His son Damian Wayne was offered a spot at his father's side, and he ended up taking it. Batman then became the insane Batman Who Laughs and set out to conquer and reshape the entire multiverse. Which definitely means you're pretty scary. If you are like, I'm not just gonna take over this world, I'm gonna like go beyond that, that's a lot.
And a 10 tangent. The Superman of Earth Tangent was originally a human named Harvey Dent, who gained superpowers through a freak accident. He became one of the top superheroes, however, after defeating Ultra Humanite, who on this Earth was created by a US government super soldier project. He became too powerful to be controlled and then threatened to destroy the world. Yeah. But after the death of Superman's wife, he became dark and vengeful, taking over the world. While he protected the world from crime, he was still tyrannical, not allowing any freedom of thought. And this is where the story of Tangent Superman's reign begins. I don't know why Superman is so codependent on Lois, or whoever his wife ends up being, cause like, whenever he loses his wife, he ends up going berserk. Like bro, you literally just like, you lost your whole planet. I think like one death, even if it is the love of your life, isn't gonna be that much. I mean, this version didn't lose his home planet, but like, still. Other versions in this list, you get it. And at 9, Subject B-Zero. Subject B-Zero, also known as the Monster, was a creation of Lex Luthor, presumably used to combat Superman, but was taken out of stasis early to help combat Ultraman and the Crime Syndicate. Despite being the creation of Luthor, B-Zero had a gentle heart and simply wished to enjoy the beauty of life and to make his father proud. Although imbued with Kryptonian-like powers, B-Zero was easily overpowered and killed by Ultraman, much to the grief of his father who actually grew to love him. So while not an evil version of Superman, you have to admit, if this guy was running at you, you'd be pretty damn terrified. Like bro, get some skin cream, some moisturizer. You look like a rock gnome named Deborah Mustard, come on. Next thing you know, you're gonna try to control me with one word and then make me a little robot trinket that's gonna get stolen by a goblin who only wants to eat pigeons. And look, you may not understand that reference, but if you do, we're friends now, okay? And at 8, Bizarro. The original Bizarro was created when Superman was exposed to a duplicate ray in accordance with the science fiction concepts of Superman's stories of the there was a lot of sci-fi going on with Superman. However, Bizarro relocated to the Bizarro world, a cuboidal planet called Hatre, which is just Earth backwards, don't really know how to pronounce it, but it operated under Bizarro logic. So like it was a crime to do anything good, and basically since Bizarro was the invert of Superman, that Earth was also populated by inverts of other DC characters. The 1986 event Crisis on Infinite Earths though rewrote DC's continuity, eliminating that Earth. Since then, 2 different Bizarro characters have appeared. One of them was a flawed clone created by Lex Luthor, and the second, the longer lasting Bizarro, was an idea of the Batman villain the Joker, brought to life by the cosmic trickster Mr. Mxyzptlk. He was first introduced in Superboy number 68 from 1958 though, and is even one of the coolest Superman versions there is, even if he's not always like actually Superman and rather like an experiment, but like whatever. And at 7, Justice Lord. For much of his life, Justice Lord's Superman background matched the Justice League counterpart, until President Lex Luthor executed the Flash. Soon after that, Superman stormed the White House, while his comrades battled the Secret Service. And as they were doing that, Superman confronted President Luthor in the Oval Office. Despite Superman's accusations of corruption and abuse of power, Luthor refused to surrender and arrogantly stated that he would find a way to get out of prison, or at least avoid being prosecuted to begin with. Superman declared that if being a hero meant that this feuding and fighting had to continue, then he was done with it, and then used his heat vision to execute the president on the spot, Shazam style. After President Luthor's assassination, the Justice Lords spent the next 2 years imposing their brand of peace on the Earth through harsh rule. Justice Lord Superman himself continued to use his heat vision to lobotomize all of Earth's criminals and supervillains. As a result, all of them became harmless, walking vegetables who obediently inhabited the world's prisons. Which, I mean, like, is a little tamer than some versions of Superman. Like lobotomy or death. Honestly, I don't know which would be considered more evil. In its sixth kingdom comes Superman. Yet another world where Lois Lane dies. Except this time it's directly at the hands of the Joker, who had flooded the Daily Planet with his toxin, killing everyone but Lois, who had managed to locate a gas mask. When trying to attack the Joker, however, Joker just turns around and cracks her right in the skull. Superman returns as Lois succumbs to her injuries and dies. And as for the Joker, he arrives for his trial, but he's killed by a new superhero going by Magog. However, Magog ends up getting acquitted of his charges after killing the Joker, which honestly, I understand, but Superman is appalled by the public embracing a killer as a hero. Already disheartened at the death of Lois, Kal-El abandons his life as Superman and retreats to his Fortress of Solitude, where he spends the next decade. Superman eventually returns and reforms the Justice League, though, with the goal of capturing heroes who took Magog's example and started killing, which results in many a battle and a nuke targeted towards metahuman genes, a la Invasion, the CW crossover. But in the end, Superman does end up dating Wonder Woman and they end up expecting a child. I mean, like, it took you a while, but you got over it. Attaboy. Halfway through into number 5, Red Sun Superman. The Russian hero known as Superman is an alternate version of the hero we know now, from an alternate reality in which baby Kal-El landed not in Smallville but rather in Soviet Russia, where he was raised by the government. This Superman, while still a hero to Russia, is antithetical to the United States and has defeated some American heroes such as the Green Lantern. His arch nemesis though is still Lex Luthor, who at this point is a scientist employed by the US government to create heroes like Superman. Luthor's copied version of Superman, however, proves a failure and endangers more lives. Bizarro. Luthor created many monsters to battle Superman, but they all didn't really do anything. This version is just scary because, like, it's what every American fears. Communism. And honestly, with some of the other characters on this list and what they did to the human race, on this earth, I'm surprised that Russia hasn't used Superman to just destroy everything. Like, whatever. However, this story is a good lesson about who you keep in your life and how people around you affect who you turn out to be. So, there's that, at least. And at 4, Reverse Flashpoint Superman. In Tales from the Dark Multiverse 1 Flashpoint, we see a world where Barry died when trying to get his speed back with Thomas Wayne after creating Flashpoint. This leads to Reverse Flash claiming to be the Flash and then trying to get the war with the Atlanteans and Amazons to stop by threatening them. Obviously, this doesn't work out so well, so in an effort to save himself, Reverse Flash races through time, changing the events to create the world exactly how he wants it, with Barry not being able to stop him, which involves saving not only Bruce Wayne, but Martha and Thomas Wayne as well, resulting in a world without a Batman. On the final page of the issue, we see Eobard with all the new heroes he ended up creating and convincing them to join him, as we can tell by the Reverse Flash symbols on their suits. Even Green Lanterns and Wonder Woman has one. This page also has a Superman, and honestly, sick suit, but being controlled, or I guess led by the Reverse Flash, makes this utterly horrifying to think about, especially when you can see the other members of the Flash family racing behind Reverse Flash. He finally got what he wanted. Eobard Thawne became the Flash. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, Ultraman. A member of the crime syndicate, an evil version of the Justice League that terrorized its Earth, that being Earth 3, Ultraman is basically the opposite to Superman. His real name, well, his real human name, is Clark Luthor, and is the adopted son of Lionel Luthor from Earth 2. Ultraman is Kal-El, with 2 L's, who comes from a version of Krypton whose people are mean-spirited and selfish. Unlike other incarnations, they gain power when exposed to green kryptonite. Just before his Krypton was destroyed, Kal-El's parents, Jor-El and Lara, send him to Earth 3 to one day seek vengeance against the being that destroyed Krypton, teaching him to become the strongest being on the planet or to become nothing at all. Upon his arrival on Earth 3, the young Kal-El coerced a couple of young alcoholic substance addicts, Johnny and Martha Kent, to adopt him, only to murder them years later once he no longer needed them. He went on to found the crime syndicate and take over the world. This guy is a homicidal, violent megalomaniac with mommy and daddy issues. However, he's definitely a character I want to see on the big screen. Please. Penultimately, and at number 2, Overman. Overman is an alternate version of Superman from a different world in the multiverse, obviously, but unlike other versions of Superman, his primary language is German. This is because on this Earth, the German soldiers won World War II, to speak around the YouTube censors, eventually taking over the planet and spreading German everywhere, as in like the language. Another Overman first appeared in Grant Morrison's Animal Man number 23. He is one among several pre-crisis characters that were returned to reality by the Psycho Pirate's Medusa mask. This Overman comes from an Earth based around the grim and gritty stories of the 1980s, and the heroes of this universe were actually a part of an experiment created by the government. Overman... This has got to be one of the most ridiculous points that I saw, but Overman went mad and destructive after contracting an STD. Not even kidding. And the other inhabitants of this earth were a black and muscular Wonder Woman, an unnamed Flash, and a punk-style Green Lantern. Psycho Pirate pointed out how ridiculous this universe is, but I mean, come on, it's still pretty terrifying. And Overgirl was ruthless on Crisis on Earth X, okay? Finally, and at number 1, Injustice. Injustice is probably one of the most popular alternate Earth stories of this generation. Thanks to the Mortal Kombat-inspired fighting game by the same name, this is an Earth where Joker managed to trick Superman into thinking that he was fighting Doomsday when he was actually killing his wife Lois Lane. That was already bad enough since we know how Superman gets in other worlds when his wife dies. However, this time she was also carrying his unborn child, which he only found out after accidentally killing her. This sent Superman into a fit of rage and caused him to kill the Joker while Batman was intimidating him, much to Batman's dismay. This one action caused Superman to go absolutely berserk and to do the one thing that Batman and everyone else feared, use his power and become the governor of the world. Through this regime, Superman killed anyone who committed a crime, resulting in Batman leading a resistance of other superheroes, not all of whom made it. While the story in the video games remains largely the same of that of the comics it generated, there are a few differences like the amount of deaths in the comics, since none of them are really playable characters, so losing them won't really affect your gameplay experience. Either way, the scariest version of Superman we've seen today, although almost tied with the one who was using guns. And at 10, Reverse Flash. Now I know what you're thinking, but isn't Eobard known as the villain Reverse Flash? But he's a villain, he's not Barry. Okay, look, alright, I get it. In the main continuity, yes, but in the dark multiverse Flashpoint story, Eobard actually becomes the Flash, and he kind of became his own form of hero in a way, like a dark, twisted, messed up hero hellbent on eradicating the human race and just subjugating all superheroes to his will, but hey, that's still kind of a hero, right? Technically it counts. And I mean, like, he's still scary and another version of the Flash, so yes, it does. This is a universe where Barry Allen dies while trying to get his powers back with Flashpoint Batman, aka Thomas Wayne. But he dies, and the Reverse Flash kind of takes his place. But once he tries to stop the war between Aquaman and Wonder Woman by threatening them and killing Arthur, you know that there's going to be some hell to pay. So he sets out on shaping the world into his own image. This involves preventing Batman from ever becoming Batman and instead creating his own superhero team full of versions of the characters we know and love, but all with Reverse Flash logos somewhere on their suits usually. And I have to say, preventing Batman from being created is probably the smartest thing that Eobard has ever done, or could have done in this situation, because either way, no matter who becomes Batman, Batman is always going to lead some form of resistance. So by eliminating Batman being created, you stopped just a resistance rising against you, so good on you. And at 9, Gorilla Grodd Flash. Grodd Friended Me is the 13th episode of the 6th season of The Flash, and is the 127th episode overall. In this episode, Grodd comes to Barry as a projection of Joe, and tells Barry that he is aware of his progressions made post-crisis. He asks Barry to assist him with getting to the Gorilla City that is now on Earth Prime, so he can at least be happy among his own kind, because currently he was locked up at Argus. Barry realizes that they have to try something new and overlook the past, and they need to work together to beat the Salivar that is in Grodd's mind. Barry and Grodd combine their brains briefly, giving Grodd super speed powers. Barry tells Team Flash what's going on, and Frost discovers that on the off chance that they don't end up separating their brains the exact moment that they escape, they're both going to die. While in the Mindscape though, Barry educates Grodd on how to utilize his speed against Salivar, and he succeeds with Barry's help. Barry awakens in reality, successfully disconnected from Grodd's mind. So yeah, a telepathic psychic gorilla with super speed after combining with the fastest man alive, yeah, that's gonna be a no for me, dog. Actually though, it was a pretty sick episode. And at 8, Speed Demon. Speed Demon, first introduced in Speed Demon number 1, is, aside from what your ex-girlfriends might have called you, a combination of Barry Allen and Johnny Blaze. Blaze Allen was a circus daredevil who sold his soul to become the first Speed Demon, and yes, there are multiple. The demon component Etrigan was actually formerly Jay Garrick before the Night Spectre stole Jay's soul. The Night Spectre approached Blaze and asked him to serve in his mission to collect the souls of the most pure and the most corrupt, which just sounds like a dream job to me, but whatever. Blaze Allen refused, so in an attempt to persuade him at his wedding, Night Spectre stole his wife's soul. He stole Iris's soul, yep. Blaze then accepted the bond, hoping to get Iris back or at least ensure her safety, but of course, he he pulls back. That's not gonna happen, bro. Speed Demon speaks only in rhymes, but is a speedster with a flaming skull head that can also breathe hellfire. Wally West, an amalgam of Danny Ketch and obviously Wally West, was the next Speed Demon who accepted the power in order to help his uncle get Iris back. It's interesting because, like, I would give up my soul for super speed. Are you kidding me? And the ability to breathe fire? Speaking in rhymes is great. Yeah, that's right. You better not hate. And it's 7, Mercury Flash. Mercury Flash is a robotic version of the Flash made by Doc Tornado as a member of his Metal League. The robot uses a mercury-based physiology, whatever that means, that can make it somehow able to channel the Speed Force, and like the actual Speed Force, not even a fake one. I don't understand how this man not only learned about the Speed Force, but was also able to replicate or siphon it off using mercury, but whatever. It's comics, okay? You don't really need an explanation as long as it helps the plot. First being introduced in the Multiversity Guidebook #1 in March of 2015, this version of the Flash can do everything the normal Flash can do powers wise, but because, you know, he's a robot, can't really do human activities, but he also has the added advantage of being a robot, so he doesn't really fear death. Not only is it in his code to not fear death, but he can also just be repaired. This version of the Flash hails from Earth 44, and I kinda really want to be him. No responsibilities, only running super fast and drinking motor oil. That's the dream. And it's 6, Savitar. As a fan of the Arrowverse, I had to include this one, okay? He's one of the most interesting speedsters on the show. Savitar, while sharing a name with another evil speedster from the comics, is actually revealed to be a time remnant of Barry Allen, being more of a future Flash than actual Savitar. He's a combination of the two. His story is pretty messed up, in essence making himself to have a classic chicken and the egg scenario, as Cisco would put it, where he caused himself to be created. In the post-Flashpoint Arrowverse timeline, Savitar comes back from the future to kill Iris West before her and Barry get married. This causes Barry to create as many time remnants as possible in order to stop him, but Savitar kills them all except for one. The one that he spares ends up getting shunned by the rest of Team Flash for not being the real Barry Allen, even though he still technically is the real Barry. It's weird. So in an act of fury, the time remnant runs back in time, creating a new identity for himself as the first speedster and the god of speed called Savitar. And then he comes back. He burns his face at some point, and then he tries to kill what would have been his wife, and he like remembers everything. He's in love with her, but he still tries to kill her. Yeah, I don't get it, but it's still pretty damn scary. Halfway through into #5, Black Lantern Reverse Flash. The Black Lantern Corps is a group of various dead superheroes and villains alike who were raised by Nekron and each given a Black Lantern ring. This ring grants them power over death, and these rings are powered by the Anti-Monitor, as he is present within the Black Lantern power battery. Those raised by the Black Lantern ring are in essence resurrected to where they were before death, but their mind is warped to serve Nekron's purpose. Those with the ring have various powers, including a healing factor, aura recognition, which allows them to see powerful emotions, energy spectrum assimilation, which lets them extract the hearts of individuals that they've slain and then use their last feelings to charge the central battery and their ring by 0.1%. And they, much like zombies, can infect others by biting them. A bite from a Black Lantern will slowly kill the one bitten, and then would turn them into Black Lanterns upon death. Basically zombies with superpowers, in addition to being an evil speedster, so definitely not something that you should be trifling with. And at 4, Johnny Quick. Johnny Allen, also known as Johnny Quick, is a criminal speedster from Earth 3. Together with his girlfriend and partner in crime Atomica, he was a member of the crime syndicate. Johnny Allen was a high-profile criminal on the run with his equally criminal girlfriend when he was cornered on the roof of Central City's Star Labs. Allen was struck by a bolt of lightning which shattered the roof, and the duo fell into the lab space below. With Allen landing amid the chemicals, something in this incident granted him super speed, and went on to become a powerful supercriminal alongside his girlfriend, who also had been empowered. While his girlfriend took the name Atomica, he took on the name Johnny Quick. And he ran through the city, answering to no one, until the day the White House burned. Around the time of Darkseid's incursion into Prime Earth, the being that had destroyed Ultraman's Krypton came to Earth, and an alliance of supercriminals formed to find a way to safety. Now my question is Johnny Quick the reason Johnny Quick became a speedster? There's the whole storyline where Barry Allen runs so fast that he disintegrates, but then he also time travels and becomes the bolt of lightning that gives him his powers. So technically, did that also happen to Johnny? Getting close to the end in #3, Godspeed. August Hart is the former detective partner of Barry Allen. August was the only witness to Barry's accident that turned him into the Flash. While going after a criminal organization called the Black Hole, August was also struck by lightning during a Speed Force storm in Central City. So August became the ruthless vigilante known as Godspeed, and got revenge on the one who he suspected to be his brother's killer. He had given up on the justice system since his brother's killer had gone free, and with his newfound power and the ability to become judge, jury, and vibrating executioner, August realized that after he had gotten his powers that he also had the ability to steal other speedsters' speed. Though for a time he could only do it by killing them, he practiced the skill enough to be able to do it non-lethally as well. With his new godlike speed, August was able to move so fast as to create a duplicate of himself at any given time, allowing him to give the illusion that he and Godspeed were different people, which is pretty damn sick, considering the alternatives are Speed Mirage and Time Remnant, which aren't technically the same thing. Time Remnants just create evil versions of yourself, apparently. Penultimately, and at number 2, Black Flash. The actual physical representation of death for all speedsters, they just can't see this guy coming. Okay, well, they can, but you know what I mean. Black Flash is the Grim Reaper of the Speed Force. Making his first appearance in The Flash Volume 2, number 138 from 1998, he was seen before the deaths of several speedsters, including Barry Allen, Johnny Quick, and Bart Allen. He also tried to return Wally West to the Speed Force, however was unsuccessful, taking Linda Park instead, Wally's girlfriend, which after past experiences, Wally, I feel like he probably did you a favor. But since he was unsuccessful the first time, Black Flash returned to try to claim Wally again, freezing time for everyone without a connection to the Speed Force. But thanks to the combined efforts of multiple speedsters, including Max Mercury, Jay Garrick, Jesse Quick, and Wally was able to race Black Flash to the end of time, causing death to have no meaning. In the CW, Black Flash was Hunter Zolomon after the season 2 finale, and was killed during season 3 when Savitar lured him out of the Speed Force and Killer Frost froze him, resulting in her first kill that actually turned out to be her ex as well. Dare I say, ice cold. But that didn't stop the Speed Force anyway, since later Barry Allen returned in the Flash Rebirth storyline in the comics, becoming the new Black Flash, until Professor Zoom took over the title after his corpse was raised in the Darkest Night storyline. There's a lot of things going on. Finally, in at number 1, Red Death. Red Death is a speedster that is an evil combination of Batman and the Flash, which already sounds terrifying, but wait until you hear his story. The Bruce Wayne of Earth 52 started off fighting crime with Robin, but Robins kept dying left, right, and center, so understandably he got darker and darker, becoming more extreme with his let's call them methods, shall we? Which honestly seems realistic to me, aside from just quitting to fight crime, but that can't happen, otherwise they wouldn't have a story, right? And DC wouldn't make any money. This eventually leads him to Barry, who refuses to give Bruce his speed, so Batman uses the various Rogues Gallery weapons to fight Barry, knocking him out, and then tying him to the front of a cosmic treadmill-powered Batmobile, and drives them both into the Speed Force. I don't even know how that happened, logically, or why that would have worked in their world, but whatever. You do you, Bat-Marty, we gotta get you back to the future. When entering the Speed Force, Barry and Bruce end up fusing together into an evil Batman with super speed and a lust for killing, while Barry's mind was trapped in Bruce's body. He then gets a visit from the Batman who laughs, who just makes him even crazier and wants to help him conquer the universe, or the multiverse even. So yeah, that's that. He's number 1.
Number 10, Bizarro Green Lantern. This version of Green Lantern comes to us from the Bizarro Super Friends team, who actually appeared to be a Yellow Lantern as opposed to a Green Lantern. I suppose yellow is like the opposite? Due to his inverted morals, this alternate Green Lantern ended up helping to cause more grief for the Super Friends, while actually trying to work alongside and kind of help the team, because, you know, Bizarro. Fortunately, the Super Friends were able to trick the Bizarro Super Friends into actually being helpful, and after they were celebrated by the citizens they'd helped save for their efforts, they decided to leave, returning to Bizarro World from whence they came. Celebrating is, after all, not really considered good to a Bizarro alternate. It is not fun. It's like spitting in someone's face when you say thank you to a Bizarro hero. Villain? Hero villain? What do we call them? Bizarro hero? They're trying to be heroes. Number 9, DCAU John Stewart. This version of John is not so scary in terms of what he looks like or his alignment, but is more scary in the sense of what he has been through. John Stewart in the Justice League animated series found himself wrongfully accused of destroying an entire planet, Ajuris 4, and its populace. He fell in love with Hawkgirl, only to be betrayed and backstabbed by her, and then later discovered his own future, where he and Hawkgirl would end up becoming the parents of Warhawk. All of this is pretty scary stuff if you put yourself in John's shoes. Though really one of the scariest things is that first point, him wrongfully being accused of genocide. Fortunately, he had his friends on the Justice League there fighting to prove his innocence, even if he was ready to accept the guilt and give up his life to take the death penalty. Number 8, New Order John Stewart. The comic Nightwing: The New Order explores the future world of year 2040, where Nightwing worked to eliminate all the world's superpowers and succeeded in removing 90% of them. As such, only a few heroes remain and are even legally allowed to have powers. One of the few is Green Lantern John Stewart, who now works for the government. I don't know about you, but I always feel like government-regulated superheroes are kind of scary and kind of a bad idea. I don't know if anyone should actually be allowed to wield the power of a super, save for the person who has themselves that power, and therefore, in theory, should best understand them and how to use them. But then I guess we have supervillains, so I don't know. Who should decide who wields power? Number 7, Yellow Lantern. So after we got a childlike look at what a bizarro version of John Stewart would be like, we got a more grown-up and established version of a bizarro Green Lantern, often referred to as just that, or as Yellow Lantern, with one of his more recent appearances being in the 2018 Justice League Volume Issue 26. Yellow Lantern, or Bizarro Green Lantern as he is sometimes known, is a member of the Unjustice League of Un-America. In Issue 26, this version of Green Lantern only makes a brief appearance, standing with the other not heroes, other villains, belonging to Earth 29 in the Hall of Heroes. I gotta work on my Bizarro speak. What do we call them? Not heroes? I am not hero? I don't know. But you can rest assured that I'm sure this alternate and his team will likely be back again at some point as foes of the Justice League, or as misunderstood allies. Number 6, Jade Nova. Jade Nova is Frankie Raynor and is part of the Amalgam universe. She appears to be part Green Lantern with the lantern symbols that adorn her and her ring, which she can use to make constructs, and part Fire, or Frankie Ray, with her ability to transform into green flames. Her name could allude to a combination of Frankie Ray and Kyle Rayner, though some think she could also be inspired by or be some combination of Alan Scott's and Thorne's daughter, Jade. The part of her that is Marvel inherited could be that she is considered a mutant in the Marvel world. Jade Nova was a prisoner of Mephistopheles until she was freed by Dr. Strangefate, who she then became indebted to. Number 5, White Lantern. This White Lantern is Kyle Rayner, and you might be thinking, but wait a minute. Aren't White Lanterns normally the best of the best? Or at least supposed to be that? How could this be scary? Well, this version of Kyle Rayner comes to us from Green Lantern New Guardians Future's End, and is driven insane after being imbued with the life equation. Rayner becomes obsessed with fixing the universe, making it pure, by forcing everyone to be obedient followers of the White Light. He killed most of the Templar Guardians and Carol Ferris, but in the end realized that he had actually lost his mind and decided to just go away and become one with the Source, finding a successor for his White Lantern ring before he passed on. Sometimes you just gotta realize when you're being crazy and be like, maybe it's time for me to go back to the Source and just chill. Number 4, DC Legends Kyle Rayner. The stories told in the game DC Legends often mimic the stories of the comics, while sometimes deviating from the original source material somewhat to tell their own stories as well. So it's unsurprising that one of the stories that the game decided to tackle was that of Kyle Rayner becoming Parallax, which also happens in the game and in the comics. This alternate version of Kyle Rayner now wears a costume similar to his own but mashed up with Hal Jordan's Parallax outfit. He also has a thick white streak down the middle of his hair, like how Jordan's gray temples were later retconned to be explained by Parallax slowly growing stronger within him, feeding on Jordan's fear. Sinestro was the one to blame in the game, like in the comics, for this transformation of Kyle Rayner. Fortunately, fellow Green Lanterns Hal Jordan, Guy Gardner, and John Stewart helped to save the day and free Kyle from Parallax's influence. Number 3, Power Ring. Power Ring is the alternate version of Green Lantern belonging to the Antimatter Universe's Crime Syndicate of America. We don't know his true identity, but being that he pretty much uses his power ring for whatever he wants as opposed to any sort of just or emotional cause, he just goes by the name Power Ring. Within Power Ring's Power Ring is the being known as the First Lantern, Volthoom. Volthoom often talks to Power Ring, which Power Ring finds useful, but annoying. He can use the ring to create all kinds of ridiculous constructs. Number 2, Quaman. What could be scarier than the Antimatter Universe? That's where this alternate Green Lantern is said to hail from as well, being the antimatter version of Hal Jordan. The Qua-Man is also known as the Dread Emissary of the Reversoverse, the Mad Lantern, and Weaponeer 666. Abin Sur of Earth 20 is the one who somehow accidentally allowed them to enter into the current reality in the series, the Green Lantern. This being is just terrifying to look at and is certainly a very vilified version of Earth Zero's Hal Jordan. Not someone I want to mess with or run into in a dark alley. Number 1, the Ring of Evil and Nazi Lanterns. This tale comes to us from the Elseworlds, so yeah, you know, it's out there. In the 1990s Green Lantern series, in annual issue number 3, we find a world where Nazis are in control and created a power ring of evil that appears to contain a demon. In this reality, John Stewart fights as part of the Green Arrow's rebellion, aiming to become a Green Arrow, which in this reality is kinda like the main continuity Green Lantern, but with arrows instead. They have a very similar oath. Guy Gardner in this reality is a jerk, surprise surprise, who continues to stay loyal to the Nazis, and Hal is somewhere kinda in between, being given the power ring and originally wanting to give in to its evil until his old flame, Carol Ferris, urges him to fight against the evil within it. In the end, Guy kills Hal, and John Stewart ends up taking the ring and bending it to his will, fighting against the evil within it, and finally purging the ring of evil for good. Thank you so much for watching, Nerd Squad. I hope you enjoyed this list and you learned lots about some more obscure and kinda weird, scary alternate versions of Green Lanterns. Who is your favorite Green Lantern? Who is your favorite alternate? Which lantern do you wish had more alternates of them? And would you like to see more scary Green Lantern tales pop up in the Dark Multiverse as it expands? Let us know in the comments below. Number 10, Kingdom Come. In the Kingdom Come universe of Earth 22, Green Lantern Alan Scott actually found a way to integrate his own lantern into his armor, making him even more powerful than before. In the comic, he looks like a massive green knight. Although he looks terrifying, he is actually meant to be one of the good guys, and after waiting years for an alien threat that never appears, he ends up joining with the Justice League. So in terms of what makes him frightening, it's simply his appearance and his insane power levels, though he does still have his weakness to wood, as he himself is still one of the good guys. Although in Kingdom Come, it also kind of depends on which side you're on in terms of who you consider to be the good guys. Number 9, Bat Lantern. What's scarier than the Dark Knight Batman? How about the Darkest Knight? Coming from the alternate Earth of Earth 32, Bruce Wayne ended up being the one to be given a Green Lantern power ring, and chosen as a replacement for Abin Sur instead of Hal Jordan. This version of Green Lantern is obviously a little more dark, as is the way with Bruce Wayne's vigilante attitude normally. Bat Lantern was actually kind of responsible for the death of alternate Hal Jordan Green Lantern from Earth 5 in the story Countdown Arena. Number 8, Leonard Lewis. Or Len Lewis as some like to call him. This version of Green Lantern belongs to the Just Imagine universe of Earth 6, and is very different from most versions of the Green Lanterns that you have come to know and love. He was created when DC allowed comic legend Stan Lee to create kind of whatever he wanted using the names of their supers, and so Leonard Lewis was born. He is a professor who became the champion of the old Tree of Life, the Yggdrasil tree. The Tree of Life granted him divine elemental powers, making him one of the most powerful alternate versions of the Green Lantern out there. The power also turned him literally green and glowing, and so he took up the name Green Lantern. Leonard Lewis's story is mostly scary due to the fact that he quickly had to adjust to being a superhero, and due to the fact that his power levels and appearance just make him seem frightening, unlike a Superman or like Dr. Manhattan kinda vibe there in my opinion. Number 7, Flashpoint. This reality is terrifying in the sense that the title of Green Lantern for Earth seems to perish with Abin Sur. Although he does manage to actually run into Hal in this reality, the government ends up confiscating Abin Sur's power ring before Hal can get his hands on it, and Hal himself ends up getting sent on a mission to stop the fighting between Atlantis and Themyscira with a nuclear strike. He ends up dying in battle when his bomb fails to detonate. Although this means that he isn't really specifically an alternate Green Lantern in this reality, Hal Jordan is known as being one of the most iconic of Earth's Green Lanterns, normally. A reality where this doesn't end up happening just seems really bleak. Not surprising though, considering that this was also the reality where we got Martha Wayne's Joker from. Number 6, Lara. Lara is actually from the main continuity, where she was a Green Lantern herself, but not one belonging to Earth. She is an alien from the planet Jade. She took over for her father, who had originally been the Green Lantern for Space Sector 1112. However, she was expelled from the Green Lanterns and went on to become a frightening Red Lantern, and then after that an undead Black Lantern. Lara herself was expelled from the Green Lanterns after she went rogue and killed Al-Mansur, the Yellow Lantern and evil son of Abin-Sur, instead of taking him into custody after he surrendered to her, which is what she was supposed to do. Because, you know, Green Lanterns don't really kill people. They're not supposed to do that. Number 5, Atomic Green Lantern. This is a tragic alternate version of Hal Jordan's Green Lantern. He originates from the DC MOBA game Infinite Crisis. This version of Hal Jordan found himself crushed by rubble while searching beneath the ruins of a building for survivors. His ring malfunctioned and his construct collapsed, leaving the rubble to fall on top of him and leave him buried. As a result of his injuries, his right arm actually had to be amputated, and his ring was pushed deep into his chest. His ring combined with a radioactive isotope allowed him to access some of his powers once more, creating a monstrous and giant green construct arm to replace the one that he'd lost. And since that change, he's also able to blast others with radiation damage, because radioactive isotopes. Number 4, Justice League 3000. In this reality, Hal Jordan comes back as an imperfect clone created by Ariel Masters and the Wonder Twins in the 31st century. The Justice League in this story was brought back through a cloning process that involved volunteers basically giving up their lives to become merged, or really having their consciousness replaced by the DNA of old school heroes. Hal Jordan himself, as such, comes back as a version of himself who no longer needs or has his power ring, but who is also not really completely the Green Lantern, but a combination of Green Lantern and Spectre. He looks super cool, but he also looks super creepy. Like, if you were in an alley at night and you were in trouble and he showed up, you wouldn't sure if you were being saved or if you're in more danger. Number 3, Dawnbreaker. Another story featuring Bruce Wayne, but of the dark Earth 32. It tells the story of how he was somewhat kind of wrongfully given a Green Lantern ring and seeks to use it to simply avenge his parents' death by murdering Joe Chill. Kind of not what Green Lantern rings are for. When the ring wouldn't let him do so, Bruce used sheer willpower to override its intentions, bending the will of the ring to his own, and successfully killing Joe Chill when he was using it. He even tries to use the ring to resurrect his parents, but he can't successfully do so. The ring doesn't really work like that. He goes on to become a vigilante who kills any criminals he comes across in Gotham. It sounds to me like this version of Bat Lantern, known as Dawnbreaker from the Dark Multiverse, might actually have been better suited to a Black Lantern ring. If he were dead though, I guess. Maybe even a Red Lantern ring or a yellow Lantern ring. Number 2, Green Lanterns of the Dark Multiverse. It feels weird to have 2 spots taken up by different versions of Batman under the Green Lantern mantle. But what can I say? Batman makes a pretty terrifying alternate of any superhero mantle that he chooses to take up, because Batman himself is, he's pretty scary. But I thought that you also might be wondering, what the usual Green Lanterns were up to in the alternate Dark Earths that belong to the Dark Multiverse. Like those that belonged to Dark Earth 32. And the answer is pretty scary because, well, they're pretty much, so far, all dead. The dead. On Earth 44, Hal Jordan finds himself killed by Batman's Alfred Protocol AI, who eventually also merges with Batman itself, turning him into a murderer. And the alternate Green Lanterns of the Dark Multiverse's Earth 32 also find themselves killed by Bruce as Dawnbreaker. The dead. Is there anything scarier than being dead? I guess if you're not afraid of death, it's not scary, but most people are, I think. Number 1, Injustice, Hal Jordan. In the alternate universe housing both the games and the comics for Injustice Gods Among Us, this alternate Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, turns a Parallax rivaling level of dark. He ends up allying himself with a fascist Superman who seeks to take control over Earth in order to protect it, after kind of going crazy following the death of Lois and their unborn child, as well as the destruction of Metropolis. This alternate version of Hal ends up trading his Green Lantern ring for a Yellow Lantern ring. Unsurprisingly, because, like I said, Parallax level here. He works with the villainous Superman and even murders fellow Lantern Guy Gardner. Yikes.